Yeah, I'm going to ask all our presenters from this session to come on up, and as I said, we made good time. It reminds me of Neil Postman's anecdote in Crazy Talk, Stupid Talk, where he had a speaking engagement somewhere in Connecticut, and when he arrived, the host there said, "Well, you made good time." Which Postman characterized, I think, as stupid talk, because he had no idea when Postman had actually left, to make that comment. But in any event, we do know when we left, so we made really good time, and now we turn it over. We've got good amount of time for Q&A, if there are Q or A to be had. Yes, Jesse.
The nature of the world of everything evolving all the time, so always updating itself and its relationships. We pull them all. Is time binding just coevolution?
Okay, the question is time binding just coevolution?
I guess I'll say something.
I think, Valerie mentioned it earlier, so what one generation can take off where the other left off and pick it up. And so, beavers are making the same kinds of dams they have for 10,000 years. We're really not like that. I think there are connections between natural evolution, which happens by selective processes that are not under conscious control, versus the kind of conscious control and when we're talking about language and culture and the deliberate attempt to leave the world so that it could be appropriated by the next generation. I think that's what Korzybski means by time binding. It's largely cultural, it's largely language.
Culture people are more into the future. And so there's no way you can catch up.
There's no way you can what?
Catch up. But the past is by future. You're born into. So you have already caught up.
Well, I know, but people make inventions from where they land, and so we entered a world that had air conditioning. Now people are trying to make more efficient air conditioners. They're trying to give alternatives to various other technologies we've had. Take fossil fuels, and now we're trying to go to green technologies. We were born into one, and now we try to adopt to another. Yeah, cultural evolution is not the same as natural evolution, although selection is involved in both cases.
Well, other questions? Jackie?
Probably for Corey, but anyone else can come in. So, as our friend Milton Dawes used to say, we have to be watching. If you build a better bomb, is that time binding? Building on generation before?
Or better or ill, yes.
It is, right?
It is.
Could you just repeat the question?
Yeah, is if we build a better bomb, is that time binding? And I said yes. Unfortunately, perhaps, yes.
I believe it was Muddy Waters who said that Blues had a baby and they named it rock and roll. That seems to be a kind of time bomb. Although they still use the same 3 chords.
Show up.
Anyone want to comment? No? All right. Yeah.
This question for Jason and Lance. Your project, taking these maps and sort of inverting the multiple gazes into the space and sort of point out the limited creativity of the individual framing. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like this Borges story, what is it, like Executive Science, where a king bankrupts his kingdom by trying to create this like one scale map that becomes sort of destroyed at the end of the story. This mistaken for the territory. Like while you were working on this project, the cathedral burned down. So could you talk a little bit about like that moment in your own, like a totally unexpected moment where the subject that you are working with ceases to be and is then reconstituted from, I'm guessing, the same kind of data set that you're working with?
Thanks for that.
I mean, it was pretty amazing that happened at that time.
Could you just repeat the question?
Sure, so, without the Voorhees reference. Matt was asking, the fact that the cathedral burned down during our reconstruction using photogrammetry, how did that affect, just our opinions on the project? And, I mean, it felt like we were kind of archiving something, through data mining. Although what was archived was already flawed, right? So I felt that it was fortuitous, but also it was a horrible event. You know, there was nothing really to change about the project. I think if we were to do it now, it would be different solution. Right?
I think I mean, part of this being sculpture for us is we often try to note the flaws and the desire for mimesis and technological mimesis and the idea that, you know, we understood that people are using it for good. And it's not that we're not using it for good per se, but we're kind of trying to note the absurdity of the ability to reconstruct the world virtually. You know, that like what's missing kind of thing. And so, yeah, you know, even in the talk we mentioned this idea that these might be the models that are left, however this world's going, right? And they be a strange model. So we're kind of noting the kind of absurdity, I think, of the possibility of that the virtual world and the real world can't quite coincide. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Great.
There seems to be a mini theme, war has been going on. And these novels that deal with time binding. There's also a book called Cloud Atlas, which kind of in the story deals with time binding. I know I don't read fiction myself. Those guys are all just lying and making stuff. For those of you who like to read fiction, that's a very interesting book.
Maybe Jennifer can comment on that.
Yeah, that's a good.
Cloud Atlas is actually on my list of, as I mentioned, I'm hoping to turn this into a larger work of a book, actually. And I've looked at several pieces of literature. True confessions, I'm an English teacher with a rhetoric PhD, so I found my intersection of the two passions that I have here with general semantics. But to your point, I'll quote Sue Monk-Kidd from Secret Life of Bees. Stories have to be told or they die. And when they die, we can't remember who we are or why we're here. The narratives give us purpose. And if we can't pass on the narrative because that time binding process is interrupted, we lose the why we're here and the purpose of what we do. Regardless of what field you're in. And to your point, you know, we can make a better bomb. Science and math tell us we can, but history and literature tell us what happens when we do and what happens when we use it. So the narrative is important and passing that narrative on is important.
That's great. I'd like to, just throw in something, and that certainly Korzybski acknowledges that the invention of writing vastly increased our capacity for time binding. But I think the points you're raising is how much does it still depend on people and on memory? And I've kidded around in the past, but I think there's some seriousness to it of like, why haven't we been back to the moon? Is it that we forgot how to do it? But really, what happens when the last person involved in the Apollo project is gone? And of course we're dealing with that in a very serious way in terms of Holocaust memory, for example. And when there was like a little video that was put out about the last Holocaust survivor dying, and immediately other people launching into denial and revision. So I'm wondering, Eric and Peggy, if you would comment on the role, because monuments and all the digital media are part of it, but how much of this is dependent on memory and on human memory ultimately?
Peg, you go first.
Oh, okay.
I'll just start talking and see what comes out.
That's the way.
I mean, I think we need to be very mindful of our physical monuments or documents or whatever you want to call them, the artifacts in which we place information for ourselves and future generations, so that even though, like, out of all of us, maybe only one of us ever heard the story or knew the story, but if it's someplace else for people to refer to, it doesn't matter if I am around to tell it. And so then I start to think about different kinds of media, and digital media are great for, I kind of hinted at this in my presentation, but I could share a document very easily with all of you, and now we all have it, and that kind of spreading it out helps kind of keep it alive. But I also think we need to be very thoughtful about forms of media. I guess we can't chisel everything in stone for the future to have it, but the kinds of media we choose intentionally to put what we know or care about in, so that we continue to have it and be able to refer to it and think about it.
So I've had a chance to participate in this for the past couple of years now. This like anti-hate group that's been based out of Pittsburgh, and so I'm not sure, Lance, if you saw this. They're using technology. They recorded several of the survivors, and then they've actually have three-dimensional. You can interact with them post-death, and sure they recorded some of the answers, but also some are kind of are algorithmic kind of generated. So, but it's an attempt to keep the relationality for children in the stories, right? So when children go to hear the Holocaust stories, they're hearing it from someone is really important. So that was part of the reason for the technology that the groups were kind of working on that. But I think you're absolutely right that it's ultimately about the relationality, and I think that's the point of that I really liked. I liked your quote about Newton. You only get where you are because you're standing on the shoulder of someone else, right? So it's that relationality that makes us who we are, right? We're born kind of spoken to, so we're coming out, right? I guess is what we're talking about today. So.
Oh, great, and by the way, that quote was on the hall in my high school, so that was long before I heard of Korzybski. What is it, Tim?
One other comment I want to make about my talk,
Oh,
and I'll make it brief,
please.
because I know everybody wants to leave. So my talk was like sort of an anti-general semantics talk, and I wrote a textbook about it. I was writing in general semantics. But it's interesting to me that first, general semantics has many similarities with the Buddhist Madhyamaka, the way teachers in Buddhism. But meditation teachers will often tell their students that what you cut through is the storyline. The suffering comes from the storyline. You not kind of get beyond your suffering if you stick to the storyline. So it's interesting. Right? There's similarities, we have differences.
Well, Okay, I do want to say that what we're engaged in this weekend is time binding. And we're all a part of that. We're keeping this knowledge alive in ourselves and furthering it by all of our contributions and discussions. So it's a real privilege for me to be here with all of you. And I want to thank you all and thank our panelists for all of their contributions. You can applaud now.